Warm welcome from Geneva, Switzerland for week 2 for the discussion group. Discussion groups are every Wednesday for the rest of the course. We did have an exceptional sample size workshop with Dale Rhoda yesterday. The update has been posted, so do look at that if you were not able to attend. Discussion group ground rules. If you could all start by typing in the city and country you're connecting from into the chat window. Again, this is, there will be a lot of information shared in this one too, but this is a participatory discussion. It's not a lecture and intended to involve everyone in listening, presenting, and giving and receiving feedback. Okay, we have an amazing, again, pretty global list of participants. That's always wonderful to see. Atlanta, Sofia, Kisumu, Florence, London, Paris, UK, Turkey, Nepal, Australia, Uganda, Liberia, Nigeria, India, Netherlands. The list goes on. That's pretty amazing, and still amazing even after years of doing this. And I hope you're also beginning, as I am, to recognize some of the names that you see running across the screen. So very packed agenda for this week 2 discussion group. This is really a key week with a focus on sample size calculation, with the first assignments having been finished for week 1 that we're going to focus on today, and also new assignments for this week and next week, as well as the Creator project. So this is what we're going to try to work through, and we'll have to be very rigorous about the time, so I may be very harsh, even perhaps to the point of being impolite, to make sure that we stay on time for this for this session. So I want to start to make sure to give you an opportunity to verify that you are where you should be in good standing with respect to the course, and that you know what to do if and what to do after this session. My suggestion is that after we finish in 58 minutes, if you've taken note of any specific actions that you need to take, that you go right to Scholar and try to work on and get something done before going back to the rest of your, no doubt, very busy day. So as we explained in the first week, work is split between the community, in which we're posting assignments that we're sharing with each other, and what we're doing in Creator. So we focused quite a bit on the week 1 assignments, and justifiably so. So this week, your objective is to complete the week 2 assignments. In addition, in the community, you'll find several updates that are intended to guide you through the development of your Harmonia concept note in Creator. And of course, the same with the sample size calculation, where you get to practice and apply what you're learning in the community is in Creator, where you're encouraged to refer to the rubric and to these community resources I've just described to draft your concept note for the Harmonia Vaccination Coverage Survey. Now, I want to emphasize today that your deadline for submitting a draft concept note, as complete as you can make it, is next Friday, even though there might be a little bit of extension, and Carolina may have we'll probably share something in that respect in a little bit. Again, a reminder, the requirements are as follows, yes, for this module. And once more, the red, as in alarm or warning or danger slide, is that the first deadline for your Creator project is the 15th of September. This is the most significant deadline because you will only be able to move to peer review once you have submitted that Creator project. So now, let's look at what you told us about the first week of the course. So you have your individual experience. Some of you are working alongside and discussing what you're doing with colleagues. That's very much encouraged, but we did want to give you a sense of what you've told us so far about your first week in this module. So this is, so 1 is strongly disagree and 6 is strongly agree. Some of you told us, I'm happy to be part of this great initiative. I'm now mastering steps and ways to do so, to conduct coverage surveys. And this, we selected these quotes because they are somewhat representative. So on the course content, this is the some of the feedback that we've received on the course being informative, interesting, having great learning material, resources are being excellent, very positive feedback. There was one request for specific hard copy examples of concept notes, and in fact we have 3. So if you've been looking at the case studies from Nigeria, Bolivia, and Malawi that have been shared along with the expert videos explaining and analyzing these cases, each of them always contains a link back to the actual concept note, or in some cases even the full protocol. So do go back and look at those updates, and in week 3 we'll be sharing the full set of case studies, putting all the videos for each one in a single update. So we are going to summarize that for you. If you have been reading along the updates, you will find specific references and links to download these. All right, I'm getting a couple of people saying that there's no video or sounds. Can you hear me and see the slides? Okay, I don't know. It looks to me like... Okay, great. So that must be a local problem for the people affected. This happens. It's part of the medium we work with, and it can be a bit jarring, but it's perfectly... I'm hoping you will both, if you do drop off for whatever reason, you will be able to view the recording, and we do usually manage to capture good quality recording. All right, so difficulty, this is what you're telling us about how difficult you're finding the course to be. The 6 is very difficult, and the 1 is very easy. Now, in terms of task completion, unfortunately you can't see, you see ellipses, but basically the first one is posted the week 1 assignments, second one is posted attended the group discussion. The tasks that have been least completed are actually reviewing chapter 2 of the reference manual, which we emphasized in last week's discussion group. And we, again, as adult learners, we have a lot of respect for you and expect that when you're confronted with these tasks and assignments that you are going to look at the reference manual, which is the basis for the course, without us having to necessarily direct you, but last week we did specifically guide you and refer you to chapter 2, and the week 1 assignment has some specific references to the manual as well. In terms of time, we have actually a pretty even split. We have half of you who reported that you're spending more time than you expected, and the other half were saying, well, it's just right, or I'm actually spending less time than I had allotted. So that is actually a very good sign. I've got a question about background noise. I do not hear any background noise, so it may be a local issue. I apologize for that, but again, the recording should be of good quality. On motivation, motivation is sky high, and that's truly impressive, and to the credit of the participants in this course. We do what we can to support you, and that's the next slide. This is, again, strongly agree is a 6, and strongly disagree is on the 1 side. And this is whether the support that you're receiving in the course or perception of the support. So I do want to say a word about WhatsApp. We've been telling people this is, if you find WhatsApp to be distracting, if you're not finding it useful, feel free to turn it off. It's not required by any means. And it is an experiment trying to figure out how do you make it useful. We like having that direct connection. It's so much more immediate than having to send emails back and forth. And when we give an answer or solution to somebody for a problem they're having, then that solution can be helpful to everyone in the WhatsApp group. But of course, it does generate a lot of traffic, and we understand if some people want to turn it off. Same with email notifications. As long as you get into the habit of checking in to the updates using the magic link. Last but not least, I do want to emphasize that with respect to the francophones in the group, we have set up a separate WhatsApp group. Hannah Kade has been dedicating time to support this group, providing support in French, and French speakers who wish to develop their project in French will be able to do so, and are being guided by Hannah to do so. So yes, it is true that the resources remain in English, and English remains the working language for the course. This is what we hope will be a useful compromise to support people who work primarily in a French-speaking environment. What are the deadlines for the week 2 assignments? For this week, please. Initially, we had announced that it would be this Friday.
Hi everybody. Yes, we have started to receive some of the week 2 assignments, but some people have expressed that, of course, they have to work throughout the week and they are dedicating time over the weekend. So again, we are going to extend it until Sunday night, Geneva time. So that would be on the 10th of September at midnight Geneva time. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. All right, so let's now talk about this week 1 community assignment. I do want to emphasize, as I said, by next Friday, your next deadline, the big deadline, is actually finishing the concept note draft for the Harmonia coverage survey. Think about this week 1 assignment as preparation and support to help you in drafting that concept note. But we do want to call for volunteers to actually make short presentations of their week 1 assignments. We would love to have someone who actually recommended against doing a vaccination coverage survey. So we did not, I only announced this in WhatsApp this morning. This is what we mean by participatory process. I'd like to call on you to step up and present your assignments. Of course, you have you have probably seen the considerations posted that prepared by Carolina. If you'd like to use the raise hand feature, so there's a little hand in the attendees panel, let me know that you are willing to present. We'll set a timer for 3 minutes, and we'll look for your assignments in the community so that we can also show it on screen. So if you'd like to be the first one, and I know it's always difficult, especially if you're not familiar with the medium, but if you posted your assignments, and almost all of you who are in this session have posted it, would like to you to make a brief oral presentation as if you were summarizing your recommendation to the Harmonia steering committee or to the EPI manager. So do we have any volunteers? The alternative is that I will pick individuals. All right. Okay, so we have Bo Robert Bishansky Patterson. Let me unmute you and welcome.
Thank you.
Great.
Let's see if I can remember what I wrote. Nobody was volunteering, and I have a practice that I should volunteer then.
All right.
Obviously, I think it is crucial to Harmonia to do not necessarily an EPI survey, but a survey that can give us a fresh estimate to what has happened since the last estimate of the DHS. I think, to me, the most challenging question is the timing of the survey. The problem in Harmonia is that the census is terribly outdated, and not only for the purpose of mapping and listing of households, etc. To me, the biggest challenge is that there probably has been, as in most countries, a huge population changes that basically distorts the figures, and even will have distorted the figures of the DHS. So actually the administrative numbers should be validated by going through this. There's probably more things I can say, but just to go to the steering committee part. I think, to me, from what I read and how I interpreted it, I think the primary challenge is to validate or to confirm the improved DPT-3 uptake, to confirm that dropout is falling, and to confirm that the efforts put in place by the managers to raise levels have actually taken place. That would be the primary objective. Secondary is, of course, the pneumococcal vaccine, to get a first estimate of this in the country. I didn't read anything into the desire to get subnational estimates, but that's obviously something that has come up and will come up in such discussions. On the third, well, actually, let me just say I'm reading my response here while I'm here. I don't think any country in the world can live with having just a single survey measuring, let's say, broader health coverages and outcomes every 5 or 6 years. I'm saying this as a mixed and DHS person, and coming from that background, that many countries are doing plenty more, but certainly 1 or 2 surveys in that period. For the third, it's obvious that our target population are the children that are age 1, to look at the coverage of immunizations in the first year. If we have money and if it's of interest, we can include the second year to monitor the measles-containing vaccine seconds and the second dose. And we can include younger kids to look at any rota uptake. Not that we would get coverage figures, but it's always good to get uptake numbers. That was as fast as I could go.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a great first presentation, and thanks for stepping up for. So we'll have 2 more presentations, and then ask first Carolina to respond to the comment on the presentations, and then work through the considerations that have been shared, but to do it in a more interactive manner. So let's have another person, another volunteer. Okay, Bhupendra Tripathi. So let me unmute you, and let me see how quickly I can find.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Welcome. So here is, I believe, your.
Yes. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah. So the question is very nice, and actually, we will be going ahead with the survey, but my submission is that we should not do early. We have to delay. Because if you see, the previous data has already given DPT-1 coverage is 95%, and DPT-3 is 80%, and this is 3 years ago. So I would say the access is good of vaccines, but definitely the demand side is slightly there because the dropouts are up. And if you compare the administrative coverage, which is more than 100, but the difference is not that much. And if you see the coverage which is DPT-3 in the admin for the current year, it's also pretty high. So the basic assumption is we can assume that the thing is moving on the right track. Now, PCV has been introduced 3 years back, but ROTA is to be introduced this year. It will be wise to differ because, once ROTA is universally introduced, you want to know whether all the kids have received ROTA or not. So for Gavi purpose, we need to have both PCV as well as ROTA vaccine coverage brought in. Secondly, when the earlier census was done, it was 15 years back. Now during 15-year period, you will definitely have a lot of demographic changes. Like in urban population, there may be a lot of people who have come to urban areas and they may be living in slums or weaker section of society. So being Gavi eligible, I assume this is a developing country. So once you delay it, a new census population for which you can design a new strategy and you can have more urban representation. Now coming to question number 2, in terms of steering committee's questions. So the primary question I would say is that we definitely want to know that, whether the dropout has resumed or reduced or not. Then has PCV and Rota vaccine coverage been nearly equal to Penta or DPT 1-3? Then have they been able to reduce the disparity among the various classes in terms of geography, in terms of demographic profile, social, religious, basically equity issues. Then if there are issues of dropout, we also want to know what are the issues and reasons for the dropout. And it will be wise to bring in some questionnaire for the vaccine preventable diseases. And we would also like to see the difference between the administrative coverage versus the evaluation, what comes out. Then I would like to say that we would also like to see that immunization card retention, which was 80%, has it improved or not? Then in terms of the target population, definitely 12 to 23-month-old kids are for sure should be there. I would suggest that can we also add the parents, like if the parents are interviewed, why did they come for immunization in time or why did they not come for immunization in time? Both the questions are important. And MCV2 is there, we can increase the age range from 24 months to 36 months. And as TT is not shown in the UIP, I'm not keeping the pregnant mothers over here. Thank you so much. I'll take a pause.
Thank you, Bhupendra Tripathi, for this for presenting your week 1 assignments. We're going to have one more presentation, and this is the approach we'll be using in the coming weeks. We'll try to make more room for more presentations, especially starting in week 4 when you'll be doing peer review. So let's have another volunteer. Yeah, all right, I don't see any additional raised hands. Oh, Thieblé Traoré, okay, so now we have more, all right. So let's go to Thieblé Traoré. I hope I have respected the order in which you have raised your hands. Welcome. Let me see if I can find...
Okay.
Yeah, your week 1 community assignments. Okay, here we are. And let me start the timer. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rhoda. I think probably I may just go. Okay, you got here. That's fine. Yes, I did say I would advise the survey to take place, EPR survey. But after going through the lecture yesterday, maybe someone could just do the cluster survey, sampling survey, rather than the entire country. Anyway, let's go for what I suggest here. If you look at the vaccine coverage they provided, I think there is some kind of concern about the number. For that reason, one could do the survey and to know how the program works, whether these numbers are accurate or not, or precise. And given the fact that the population is dynamic as well, it's now kind of closed population, and it might be a good way to, if you do the survey, you get an estimate, then you know you can predict how, even if you introduce a rota like my colleague just said, next year, you know where the gap is, then you can correct. And and I did mention that one here due to the uncertainty in the vaccine coverage, because it is always an estimate. So I would like to do the survey rather than wait for the census, the new census data, because that can help, even the survey can help you to have the population grow estimate, if I understand well in statistics. And question 2 is whether the steering committee, the concern here, I will say Yes, because if you look at MCV1 coverage and the dropout rate for DPT3, well, there are a lot of concern here. It could be due to the data quality, or then you still really you need to go ahead with the aspect to demonstrate how the program will work, or the improvement of the vaccine coverage. I don't know if that's clear, but I will take that approach. For the target population, because if you look, the EPI vaccine schedule, BCG is given at birth. Then you got other vaccine 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks, all comprise the population. One could just stop from 12 to 23, but you're gonna exclude. Oh, sorry, you're gonna exclude the little one, the age 0 to 12. I would take them because that's how I will estimate correctly the drop using the BCG. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, so now we're going to hand it over to Carolina Danavaro. We also are very pleased to welcome Felicity Cutts, who is one of the subject matter experts who has contributed to the course design and development. She's with us today and will be, after Carolina, will be sharing her experience and expertise. Carolina, over to you. So first, obviously, it'd be useful to have your feedback and comments on the 3 presentations we just listened to before going into the considerations document. You should have a button or a cue of some kind to share your screen, so you just need to click on that button when you're ready. If you'd like to show, I believe you'd like to walk through the Word document that has been posted with the in the community. So the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was looking for the final file because I had the one that I had on my documents without some links, so sorry about that. So I'm trying to figure out how to share that.
There should be a button. Screen? Not yet. There's a queue. You should have a button somewhere that says, click here to share your screen. It's in the GoToTraining control panel. You have a button called My Screen with a little icon of a screen. Everyone has trouble finding it. Yeah, that's great. Perfect.
Okay, so this is the version minus the 1 of what you have. Well, first of all, thank you to the presenters, because really the idea of this exercise was to think critically about whether a country should or should not do a survey and the timing of that survey. So really the idea was that using the scenario of Harmonia, you look at chapter 2 of the manual, and some of the terms, the statistical terms, also are available in your material. And based on the responses we have received, we put some considerations. So I think you will. I don't know if you can see my screen all right or not.
Yes, your screen is being shared.
Okay, so for question 1 and question 1. So first of all, I'm going to tell you that in this scenario, we this particular country did decide to do a survey, and the considerations were what some people has described, the time that it has passed between the DHS and the next plan survey. The other considerations were that there is a Gavi eligible country, and the census is an important consideration because, as some of you put in the module, the census if they are doing the preparations, it's likely that they have an updated, they are working on updating the enumeration areas, or that can be used as a sampling frame. So you can actually, the first step is really to discuss with the Office of Statistics to see if they have the material available, and waiting ideally to time that in relation to that part of the census preparation. So if about sampling frame, it's really, really important here that you can use the best sampling frame available. And the sampling frame really is a list of the units from which you're going to sample. And ideally, that sampling frame has to be as realistic as possible. So have the universe of the population or the households or the enumeration areas that you're going to select from. Then the other issue with the census is that even though if the census happens as planned, which is next year in this scenario, there are always delays with census. So that a country tells you that the census is planned for, let's say, 2018, it's always to be taken with a little grain of salt, because that may be delayed. The other important consideration is that so some people really had a question or comments about using the new census for the survey, but it was not clear if what they were trying to say was really that the census is going to give us the updated sampling frame, because other than that, after the census is done, the projections are issued. So we are talking probably 2 years after the census is when the EPI program will likely have figures to update the denominators. So that's not going to really interfere or affect the survey, except in the sense of the sampling frame. So I hope somebody's taking notes of any questions here, because I will continue. So really the next bullet, the preparation to the census, is that there are enumeration areas and cartography that gets updated when they are planning a census. And I think Bob Pedersen made that comment in his presentation. About the frequency of surveys, WHO has some guidance, but it's not one recommendation for every single country, because it really depends a lot on the country. So for most countries, a survey is advised every 5 years or thereabouts, but in countries that have really good systems, you may be able to delay that survey, etc. Gavi, however, it's a little lower, has some requirements for surveys. And for any application, they require a survey within 5 years. But there is in the Gavi requirements an exception for countries where there is a good reason not to do the survey in that moment. For example, there's civil conflict, or coverage is so low that a survey may not really make a difference in improving things at that point. Or let's say the DHS is about to happen, etc. Gavi also has a requirement for any campaign, any vaccination campaign that done with Gavi support needs to have a post-campaign coverage survey. And finally, one consideration for was talked here is about the new vaccines. So the survey is only going to allow us to have ideas about the vaccines that children have been using already. So if we do it now, it will not tell us anything about Rota. But it can tell us something about PCV and the acceptance of multiple injections, because we can see that in some settings, giving injectables at the same time will result in some resistance from health workers and parents. And with the surveys with dates, you will be able to see if the vaccines that are recommended at the same age are actually being given at the same time. If you want to read more about denominators and how to assess the denominators and some of these issues about the census, we included a link to a recommended reading. So if we don't have a new sampling frame if we still have to rely in an old sampling frame, it's a problem, for sure. I think somebody's asking that. So the ideal scenario would be to talk to the census people, and ideally they would have some way of helping you obtain the most updated sampling frame with enumeration areas. Just for the sake of time, I will go to question 2. So in this question about the primary question of interest, this really refers directly to section 2.3 and 2.5 of the vaccination coverage manual. One key point here is that it's really, really important to establish a survey committee, a steering committee with clear terms of reference, because as you saw here just with this exercise, we can probably have many different opinions, and a lot of the opinions have pros and cons, so we should really, these things need to be discussed. In this question, we were referring again to the inferential goals that we're going to set. So we were thinking about the questions of estimation, classification of areas, or comparison as the main goal, comparison between places or baseline compared to something, an intervention and something that's going to happen later on. In this case, really our recommendation is to, at least for the country, to have an estimation of vaccination coverage for different vaccine and doses. And why this is important? This is, it's important because we will estimate for each vaccine, and then we have to power the survey or do the sample size calculations to estimate with a precision level that we feel comfortable with. And again, we will continue discussing a little bit more during the module this issue of the level of representativeness, whether you want to do national estimate only or some subnational level. So the difference again between estimation, classification, and comparison is which one is the main goal. Estimating vaccination coverage is usually the main goal in a vaccination coverage survey, where you will have a point estimate. Let's say the BCG is 90% with some confidence intervals around that point estimate. When you are doing the main goal being classification, for example, you may say, we are very confident that region A, B, C, D are above a threshold, and regions X, Y, and Z are below a threshold. And for these others, we are not quite sure because the uncertainty is still kind of in the middle of the threshold. So again, we will see a little bit more. It's in the video and it's also in the manual. And if you still have questions, please reach out. So I want to take a little time to talk about the word comparison, because a lot of people said that an important point was to compare. So here the word comparison, we are putting it in quotes because we don't know the real vaccination coverage, right? So we estimated with survey, we estimated with admin, and we estimated over time with different surveys. So we can contrast and look at the different results based on the different methods of measuring. But because the methods of measuring are not exactly the same, it's very difficult to really compare, because you don't know if you're really comparing apples with apples. And you can look at, and I'll rather use the word contrast or triangulate the results from this survey with others, because it can give you an idea if things have improved or not. But comparing face value, as we put here, it's not really appropriate, because the surveys have different sets of biases that are coming from the different sampling frames used, different methodologies, different even criteria. So when you're comparing a survey done 5 years ago with a new survey that is of a different kind, particularly a DHS with a mix, you can have a sense of things having improved or not, but I would avoid using the word comparing, because it's not the same methodology.
You usually
So-
going to help me prepare them, like usually? Yeah, then I pick.
I'm trying to figure out, there's somebody, everyone's muted, but we're still hearing someone's microphone. So please mute yourself. The person who's having a private phone conversation.
Okay, so the next question is a little bit about subnational level, and you always would like to have a big survey where you can estimate for every possible place, but initially you will have to see what's feasible in terms of sample size, ensuring the quality and the cost. We will talk more about sampling, including the role of GIS and Module 2A. So some people ask about GIS, and we'll talk about that more when we talk when the deep dive into Module 2A on sampling. So the third question, it was who will comprise the target population and why? Here, again, there was some confusion. This is very clear in the manual, but some people were thinking more like who is the owner of the survey, so who is the survey results for, and they put the API manager, etc. But what we were really going here for is what age children you're going to include in the survey. And here it's important to note that if you're really evaluating vaccines in children under 1, usually you do a cohort of children 12 to 23 months to give them enough time to have received all the vaccines. Because if you go lower, some people put from 0, you will have children in your sample that would not be eligible for some vaccines. So let's say a child who's 6 months old will not yet be eligible for the measles-containing vaccine. So then, again, surveys are not a tool that will give you a result about what's happening right now. It will really give you information about what happened at least 1 or 2 years before. So the other issue here is that Harmonia includes measles dose at 18 months of age. So it's really important to consider that because that vaccine makes part of the schedule, that you really have to consider assessment. So if you only go with the 12 to 23 months, roughly 1/2 of the sample would be of the right age. So there are some considerations to include children 24 to 35 months of age. And here are the pros that you can estimate this. So you could have estimates for 2 birth cohorts, but of course, the older children get, the less availability of cards, for example. The mothers are less likely to remember, and including 2 cohorts, and that's in Dale's questions, so you can refer to that. You may sample just for the bigger number of households and then interview everybody you get 12 to 23 and 24 to 35. Can you give me close the door, please? And then, again, for some people who suggested going up to 5 years of age is a possibility if you have a good availability of cards, particularly. But if not, the ascertainment bias, knowing the vaccination status of those children, may be more difficult. So finally, tetanus, it was mentioned by some people. So in this example, we will not include it. Just for simplicity, but you can read more about it in the manual, and here it's where. And it also depends very much on the schedule. Somebody asked about serosurveys, so collecting blood to measure immunity, and again, we're not going to cover that, and there is a recent review done by Felicity where it tells you the pros and cons and some considerations for serosurveys. Somebody asked or mentioned to use this data for performance-based financing, and that's against what is really recommended by WHO Strategic Advisory Group of Experts, because all measurements have biases and limitations. So the position of WHO is to be cautious about using admin data and survey data for performance-based financing. And finally, some of people here in the call, Dale, Felicity, myself, we wrote a paper about the role of surveys and its limitations. So those are the links. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Carolina. So we have 15 minutes left in this session. Very pleased to see that Felicity Cutts has been able to resolve a couple of technical issues and join us in the session. I also see the questions piling up in the chat. We've been encouraging you to post your questions and comments in the chat, so thank you for doing so. For the sake of time, because we are going to have to end the session at the top of the hour very abruptly. So we will save the questions and follow up in the update recapping the recording and the other resources from the discussion group. So we will be able to follow up on that. And the reason that we will do that is, let me shift control back, or make myself the presenter again. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to unmute. Okay, I see Felicity has joined us by phone. Felicity, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I have a problem with my internet, so I have to redo everything and get on by phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed, and I believe other participants. So we have 131 people connected in addition to the course team, so over 130 people who are connected right now. And we've just finished discussing the week 1 assignment in the course. And I would now like to turn to Carolina to introduce Felicity Cutts, and we have some ideas as to what you might be able to share with us that would be useful to the participants who are currently working feverishly on the concept note for the country of Harmonia.
Okay, it's my honor to introduce Felicity Cutts, Professor Felicity Cutts, who used to work at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and she now consults for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She has years of experience in the field, and it's really an honor to have her with us. She was one of the writers of the manual, and she's going to talk about some considerations, some practical considerations for surveys. Felicity?
Yes, thank you, and I'm very happy to join despite the technical difficulties. I know time is short, so I'll just get straight into it. In terms of the sample size, the week 2 discussions, sample size obviously relates to everything else, to all the other parts of the survey. So when you're first starting to think about the objectives of a survey, and then you get down to estimating sample size for different options, then you start to think about survey implementation, and then you might start to do the budget, and it's very iterative, so you have to realize that you will go round in circles quite often, and need to be prepared to do that, because there's always compromise involved. But I just wanted to firstly share a little anecdote to illustrate one point, and then make some more general points about the need or not for subnational data to be collected via surveys. So just a little anecdote. In this discussion group, and when I myself am actually living in the south of France now, so in the comfort of our office or our home, we can think, oh, it's easy to do a survey, a coverage survey compared to some other things is relatively straightforward, and all you need is the money. As long as some donor will cough up the money, we can do whatever we want. But we have to remember the realities in the field, and one of those realities, unfortunately, is security. And I remember a time I worked in Mozambique for 4 years during a time when there was a war going on, and a province that we had been doing a pilot project to increase coverage in for 3 years, and we had planned to do a survey after 3 years of implementation, and we were also including some questions about knowledge and attitudes of mothers. The security situation changed just before we were implementing the survey, so that for about half of the districts we actually had to take a military escort with us. And I have very strong memories of being out in the bush in the middle of this very beautiful landscape and in the middle of palm trees, and going along dusty roads and arriving at a village and wheeling into a house with dust all around us because we had 2 pickup trucks full of soldiers all carrying bazookas with us. And the women of the household were very calm, just looked at us, went in and tried to get things for us to sit down, and we conducted our interview. But who knows, how the presence of the military affected what they told us. And it certainly made our life very much more complicated for the logistics of the survey. And although that's a very fond memory for me, because I remember the humorous side of it, the reality was that we ended up doing the survey in a situation where all of us were at risk. And you start to wonder, well, it's one thing putting yourself at risk to deliver an intervention, to go and vaccinate people, to go and treat people if there's an epidemic, to do something that really benefits directly the people you are reaching. But it's actually another issue when you're just collecting information. Is it really worth putting people in insecure situations to go and collect information? And unfortunately, the situation is in many countries that there are parts of the country where if you try to go and collect information, you may be putting people's lives at risk. So I think that that's possibly an extreme example, but I do think that sometimes we can talk very glibly about doing a survey, and we have to remember the realities. Then moving on to subnational level, and particularly trying to get district level data via household surveys. I think, again, in the interest of time, I'll go to the punchline first, is really, I can think of very few situations where that is a good investment of money and time. Not because I don't like to have good high-quality coverage data for every district in the country. Of course, everybody would like that. But the cost and effort to try and get that good quality data via a household survey, even if it were feasible in all districts, which in most countries it is not, is just out of proportion to how those data may be used. And I'll give some examples. For example, a household survey, it's a cross-sectional survey, so it's a little snapshot at one time point in an area. Now, if there's a lot of migration within a country, depending on when you do that survey, you may or may not have high-risk populations living in a certain area. Now, at national level, in-country migration kind of balances out so that snapshot may be a reasonable estimation of what's going on over the whole course of the year, because the people who were in one place at one time would have been in another place in the same country at different times. But in a district, you might have, one place I worked in Nepal, we used to have in the winter, people would come down from the mountains and spend 2 or 3 months in the valley where I was working. And where they came from, there were no health services at all at that time. So if I had done a survey when they were there, I would have got a very different result for a survey when they were not there in that district. And depending on the size of the population, the contribution of that migrant, of those migrants, may not make a huge difference to coverage, but it does make a big difference to infectious disease transmission. So then you might decide, well, that population should be a specific population of interest, and it might be better off doing a survey particularly in that population rather than in the whole district or trying to do every district. I think another issue is how data are used, how district level data are used, and very frequently we just rank them and we say, implicitly or explicitly, we say the districts with high coverage are doing great and the districts with lower coverage are not doing so well, and we criticise them. But we very rarely take account of the inputs to the programme or the barriers that each district faces. And it may be that a district that has a lot of barriers, geographic or poor health services, or a lot of health workers who've been away or sick or they haven't been paid, or a population that is very suspicious of vaccination, they may actually be working harder and be more motivated and only get 60% than another district where everything's very easy and they might get 85% coverage without trying. So I think that we really need to be able to compare inputs and population characteristics as well as the outputs of coverage. And unfortunately, many countries don't have very good data on inputs. So it's actually quite difficult quite often to get a list of where all the health facilities are, where all the vaccination, where all the cold chain is, where the vaccines are being delivered, how many health workers are in each health post. Those kind of data are not tracked very well, and it would be good to invest money into monitoring the inputs and not only this constant focus on coverage. I think a third point for some countries on a perhaps more optimistic note is many countries actually have very high national coverage now. And I think just by doing arithmetic, if the average country coverage for the whole country, if they have over 90% coverage, then just mathematically there can't be very many districts that have low coverage in order for the national coverage to be so high. And so you might end up, you might be better off then starting to think more strategically about, okay, where are those 10% that are not yet vaccinated? Where are they likely to be? So if your DHS 3 years ago told you that you've got 90% coverage of DPT-3 overall, instead of then just trying to do every district, be more strategic and think, where is it that I might find those unvaccinated kids? Let's just try and focus our efforts in a better way. And then districts themselves are still, even the way WHO defines them, is still about 200,000 population on average. So within a district, a program manager would still like to know where are the worst areas. And often the areas or the populations within a district that are least likely to be vaccinated are also really, really difficult to include in a household survey, either because they're not permanent residents, they don't live in formal housing, they live on the railway line, or they live outdoors, there's street kids, there's people that are not represented on that formal household listing process. Or for security reasons, that there are people that you just can't access, or there are people that don't trust people from whatever organisation it is that is doing the survey, so you can't get reliable answers from them. So even if you can do a district level survey, you may still not be getting, by a household survey, you may still not be getting the information that you need for your programme. So I think that overall, just to try and keep very focused on what information is really most important for the program, to be realistic, to remember all the aspects of implementation, not just the cost, and really constantly ask yourself, how useful is this information going to be? Think of various innovative options. It's not necessarily only national or every district. You can focus, you can choose certain areas. And if you're going to do several surveys, then think about phasing their implementation in a way that you can really ensure high quality. And that's it.
Thank you, Felicity. Reda, are you still there? If not, I think I'll close the call. We are taking all the questions that you have submitted, and also we will post the slides, and there will be a recording, so some people who could not hear very well can listen to Dr. Katz's part and ask any questions. Reda, you're still here, so you can close it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. Yes, so thank you everyone again. We had over 130 participants in attendance. For those of you who were unable to attend, you will be able to benefit from our presentations, both from Professor Felicity Katz, from Carolina Da Navarro, and from fellow colleagues in the course by viewing the recording and completing the catch-up task. I want to thank all involved and wish you a good rest of the week to complete that week 2 assignment, which is now due on Sunday evening, I believe, Carolina. So going to unmute everyone, and it's going to make a lot of noise with over 120 people now connected from all over the world. So wishing you well, and as you know, we're here if you're having difficulty, if you've fallen behind, if you have something you want to catch up on, if you have a question, whether it's about Scholar, about the subject matter, about the assignment, about your Creator project. Don't let time slip by. The first deadline is coming up fast. Don't get caught in the headlights, and just persist. We're seeing great, amazing level of commitment, dedication, passion in this course, and are grateful for your efforts.
Eagles, from you, good guy.